Okay, how about Hispania? Um, so I, out of all the Azure Wish games I have, I've played a few of them. Out of the older ones, or ones that I have had for longer, this was always kind of low in the leveling, especially respect-wise. But then again, I don't tend to respect Britannia games very much. Yet I played it more than, I played Russia. It's hard to judge things like EU and La Grande Guerre because they're so big that. But I probably played them close to as many times as I played this. Um, unlike sorry, unlike La Révolution Française, which is about the same size as this, and I played the shit out of to figure out how defective that was. Um, and this is kind of defective. There's no question about that. Well, significantly so. Um, but one of my major criticisms, which was that it felt like it's inherently unbalanced, I don't think that's actually the case. I think, it's a four-player game where if everybody's walking in and kind of understands how the points are going to flow, that they can make the game into something a lot more balanced than you would expect. And expectations of where nations are just sort of inherently weak. For example, failures by the Visigoths in early plays have made it so that, like, I'm a little less worried about them, so people don't beat them up when they can. Styles of play, etc., can all turn out to make it balanced and can actually turn out so that countries like Castile and the Visigoths, that I felt had these great defects in them, actually don't. Now, you may not hit the historical situation. So, for example, getting the complete Reconquista seems unlikely, although maybe with the right distribution of nations, um, players and victory points that are, accumulated and everything, you might get historical results sometimes. The driving force, like in all Britannia style games, is more on where can I get my points, and when you're playing the bidding game, there's no real drive that'll make. There's nothing in the bidding game that helps make it historically hold together. I don't think there's anything in the four-player assignment that particularly makes things stay historical either. Which is different from Britannia and some of the other games in the series. Those tend to stay a little bit closer. There's a lot more variance in this with the die rolling, with the bidding system, if you're playing with that, with many, many different ways to get points and different strategies that you might use. If somebody's getting ahead in points, that changes the whole flavor of things, as it does in most of the series. So on that side, I wouldn't say that there's a huge negative. The rules and some of the presentation elements, like the player aid sheets, are AWE standard, which means they're really shitty. And there are exceptions for the company. I mean, like I said, Russia is very, very well done. It has a few ambiguities, not much. Other than that, Scandinavia was pretty good. and I think the DDRI games, although a little loose around the edges for a tactical game, are still, within the realm of, hey, you're not really facing something that feels crazy here. Uh, I have Le Fou and La Glaive probably is okay. I don't remember there being too much wrong with that, except for kind of the game concept, which is this dual planar diplomacy game, which just felt weird and was not what I was hoping for, but it was what I kind of expected. And there's a couple I haven't looked at. Grand Sequel was kind of a mess and didn't meet my desires, so whatever. All right, back to what this is. Well, let's talk a little about components. We got some stuff in here that I didn't use. Big pile of... so this has the turn sheet in it, kind of like Invasions does, etc., to make up for there not being kind of like a turn explanation in the turn record track. And that would be something that I probably should use. But I never do. The map is perfectly fine. The regular scoring sheet, if it has any errors, it's a problem because of the blacked out stuff. And it also just disturbs me, but you've got a backup, the Barbarian one, which is all white space because nothing ever stops being, I guess. I don't know. That didn't seem to meet what I thought about that one, but I guess they just cleared all the black stuff because they'd have to put in, end dates. That would be the only thing that would cause you not to be able to score points on things. You got the combat charts and whatnot here. I didn't mention maps. And you got a lot of these sheets. So that is kind of a plus. Everybody can have their own little map and look at it. It takes some time to figure out how to cut, or you could photocopy them. They wouldn't be much worse printing, except a photocopy of an iffy photocopy. These aren't that bad. But yeah, the nation cards, instead of being cards, they're just paper, which, that's a little low on the Britannia style in terms of the quality. The rule book is pretty shitty. Leaves a lot of ambiguities, some contradictions. AWE standard. The map is 90s era computer graphics, and it appears to be, it really looks it. Almost looks like it's printed out on a dot printer. And the counters are beautiful. They also are 90s era computer graphics, but they're really well done and a hell of a lot better looks-wise than most counters that I saw from that period. Really, really thin, though. Incredibly thin, which is not a big deal with this game because of the width of the counters, but it's AWE standard again. If you're looking at wargame sized chits, as they have in, EU and Le Grand Guerre, it's a great deal more disturbing. You have a bag of extra counters that aren't part of the game, and there's no instructions for them. There are not enough extras that make sure that if you lose something, you've got a replacement, but you might. Kind of a weird situation. Some of the color choices, most of the colors work really well. There was one case I pointed out, Seville and Badajoz. There may be a couple of cases where there are colors that are too similar that are on the board at the same time, and close to each other and interacting in a way that's kind of painful. Uh, there are things that are difficult to read on the counters. That is again an AWE standard. It's not that big a deal, like the red hand for the elite units on the Almohade pieces is not all that clear. As a game, this is one of the weakest in the Britannia series. I think not just because of the rules being ambiguous and having their issues, but more because of, first of all, there's a huge burden of stuff going on in it, much higher than is usual in the Britannia games. A lot more, special cases going on, a lot more nations that are collecting points for killing stuff on given turns. A lot more in and out, hey, you get a major invasion, but it's your third turn on the board type of things that are just kind of, man, it's hard to keep track. It's hard enough to keep track of stuff in the simpler ones, but this one bloats it to a large extent, and so it's harder to get used to the game because of the number of different changes in it. And this all pertains to invasions as well, which is sort of, let's take that idea and take it even further. Let's see just how much of that kind of complexity we can hang off the Britannia system. I feel this one still feels pretty true to the Britannia concept. It just holds up worse. You're hanging too many ornaments on it, and it makes it harder to approach the game. And unless you are studying it or something, I think you're going to have trouble. You're going to walk away with a less pleasant experience than you would with most of the games in the series. It's also got a lot of randomness in it. Yes, all the Britannia games have lots of randomness. You're rolling dice and everything. But because of the 10-sided dice, and, well, it's not just randomness. It's also a lot of variability that the players can bring into it, which you could say is a good or a bad thing. But it makes it harder to sort of predict what the nations are going to be worth, which makes the bidding system particularly pernicious, especially given that there are minimums on the bids that are set based on some expected average that came from playtesting or dreams of the playtesters or whatever. I have no idea. They may have come up with some sort of calculation mechanism to figure out, hey, maximum points, minimum points, so that's the average or something like that, because some of them seem way off. Others, I mean, the worst for me is the Romans, which it feels to me like a well-played Roman will always score significantly better. I'm not sure that can be said about any of the other players now, or any of the other nations. Now, on the bright side, this is not the kind of game where players can't gang up on you and bring the leader down. There's a lot of capability for that, and of course that's going to impact the historical aspect of it based on the nations people take and whatnot. But it does mean that there's some recourse, and especially with the Romans, hey, the guy who gets the Romans and in the bidding game it's automatic. It's just somebody gets to pick the Romans and they get them at $5 less. In the non-bidding game, there's one player who gets them, but presumably everything's balanced, but I assume the balance is done on those average points rather than on any kind of realistic valuation. At least what I've seen is what the game actually presents. But the fact that the Romans go so early, if you are used to the game, you'll know that they're going to score high. When you see them score high and not completely flub, which they might do, I mean, it's possible, I'm sure. I mean, the dice could just go completely against them. You end up you end up with the opportunity to try to even the game out. But like with any of the Britannia games, you pretty much have to have a real grasp on who's going to get what points at what time. And that kind of means you're not going to get, you know, a good play until you've gotten a lot of experience with the game. And I've got a fair amount, I think, at least with solo play. I would never bring this to a group. If I had a group that wanted to do it for some crazy reason, sure, but it would never be something that I would like kind of try to push on to people for that very reason. But it works fine solo. It's impossible to play it in other than 4 players without the bidding system. And the bidding system feels flawed. So that I'm not sure about the 4-player standard on the long game. That's the only thing I've done, and I've done it once or twice at most. I've done it once, maybe twice. I don't know. And it just, you know, if you're walking into the game for the first time and you're playing the bidding system because you don't have 4 players, you're looking at really, really making wild guesses on what you're going to get and, 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 and what the valuations are. Yeah, it's one reason I keep the record sheets, or started keeping the record sheets, is it gives some idea of how much variance there is. And, you know, if you're not in a good position with the country, don't expect to make 5 points under the bid, the average. Anyway, that's about all I have to say about it. It is not a game that I respect. It's not, but I don't respect the Britannia games in general. Italia might be the exception to that. I thought that was kind of cool. On the other hand, like all of these, there's sort of an ease of play and everything that, at least for me, makes it kind of a comfort food type of gaming. Although, honestly, I would rather pull out one of the others for that. The main reason that I played this, maybe as much as Britannia, which is to say more than any of the others in this series. Well, first of all, I had it kind of early. But also, the very fact that it was so hard to see anything like the average points come out. And, you know, for the Visigoths, a major, you know, one of the 5 powers that you're stuck taking one of these for the bidding game. And one of the other ones is Castile, which relies on the Visigoths not just doing well, but doing well and leaving you with a good setup. So I don't know. And then ambiguities like, you know, where the penalty points, how the penalty points are assessed when the Umayyad transition, whether they have to give Seville the start the way that Visigoths have to give Castile a start, or is that just, you know, points everywhere, even though none of the other nations care about what the Umayyad are handing off? It's just, you know, I shake my head and don't know how to react to the difficulties that the rules present. Um, Actually, they say it's 4 or 5 players. There's 3-player variant anyway, or there's 3-player scenarios. I guess that's about it. I'll send this out. Hispania. And if you're interested in it, there are cheap copies available on BGG nowadays.